He's together, Hamling, McDonald, he rolls it, he tumbles it, he goes it.
The thrust forward, Cameron again, takes two to stop him now.
He's together, Hamling, McDonald, he rolls it, he tumbles it, he goes it.
The thrust forward, Cameron again, takes two to stop him now. You can't stop him. Does the same, the danger man involved again, and now it's Brown to finish it.
Hello, I'm Damien Barrett and welcome to Access All Areas, brought to you by Virgin Australia. The Power pull off an upset by taking down the ladder leader. The spotlight heats up at Moorabbin, and in yesterday's game, the Pies win ugly after a difficult week. Hello to you, Matthew Lloyd and Jimmy Botel.
Yeah, spot on. Ugly win, Damo. But the Dogs did a lot right again. As we've seen much of the year, Lloydie, look, they get a lot of the ball. They try and rebound off half-back. But again, it's the same way they get beaten. They just can't put enough score on the board.
I didn't think the win was that bad yesterday.
Yeah.
The Western Bulldogs threw the kitchen sink at Collingwood. They came out that ferociously. And sometimes you just got to weather the storm. It's June. It's round 14. They got the job done like a good side did. Geelong lost one. So I'm just saying, I think it was pretty good.
They've weathered the storm well, haven't they? I
Yeah.
mean, the 10-3 scoreline gets them to second place on the ladder, but the last 6 to 7 weeks have been gritty, haven't they, at best?
Yeah, well, I think the frustration from Nathan Buckley must be, when's this side going to put the whole four quarters together? We've seen them play some really good games, but allow the opposition back in, whether it be for a quarter or 10 to 15 minutes. But I think he's trying to build up for the back half of the year and see him really kick into gear.
I think where they've dropped off from last year is the cohesion going forward. So they were so dynamic with obviously players and scoring. I think they're finding scoring much more difficult this year, which is probably frustrating Buckley a bit.
Frustrations, you can even use the word grumpy the way he seemed to be carrying in his press conference, Nathan Buckley. You didn't even think this man, who was voted by you, Lordo, and two other superstars of the game, best on field, he didn't think he was best of field?
Oh, he was best on field by a mile. Clear cut, by a mile.
Nathan Buckley said he wasn't the best player on the ground, Lordy.
I think he's been... I know I heard he had a crack at Brodie at half-time, wasn't happy with what he was doing. I think Tim English... around the ground, did a couple of things which probably set up goals, which that might have been the frustration, but he just monstered him. He put it on a platter. Once the pace went out of the game, it became a stoppage game, and Grundy just absolutely dominated.
The bar must be extremely high for Nathan Buckley. He's had 25 disposals, 50 hit-outs and 2 goals as the sole ruckman, and would be probably on the podium for the Brownlow at the moment this year. So, geez, he's a tough taskmaster.
So let's just go through that, Lordy. You voted on the medal that was at play yesterday alongside Wayne Carey and Nick Rebold. There's a bit of footy talent amongst that trio, and you all gave him 3 votes.
And our 2s and 1s went everywhere else. So I went Treloar, Daniel, Chris was involved, Roughhead was involved. So I think, it was clear as anything.
Jimmy, there's still a focus on a smaller player in the forward line in Jordan De Goey. He just demands the footy. But the combination, the machinations around the 3 tools, Reid, Cox and Mychek, is it something that they can work with? And is it a horses for courses scenario?
I'd like to see it play out for a good month. Look, I know they played the Bulldogs, who rebounded the ball really well yesterday afternoon at Marvel, but it's at Marvel, and the Dogs, even when they're going poorly, that's their one wood. It's their speed off halfback. Easton Wood, as we see there, JJ Johannesson, Caleb Daniel is down back, and even Lockie Hunter as a midfield gets to halfback and rebounds the ball really well. They've got North Melbourne, the Hawks and the Eagles. I want to see them play it that way. Look, they're going to have to start channeling the footy through a few others, Lloydie, if they want the big 3 to work. You've even got Hoskin Elliott, who's a marking forward.
Lloydie, you being the key forward on the panel, what do you make of what they're trying to do here?
I believe that they go to Jordan De Goey way too much. I don't think De Goey's a great mark above his head. Some may say they think he is, but I don't think he is.
So how do they go to him when you've got the 3 bigger guys?
I think every time he's out of the goal square. So I think Ben Reid played well yesterday, but Cox and Mychek, they always look around and say, it's going to Jordan. It's a bit like Lance Franklin at Sydney. They go to him too often, they go to De Goey too often. So I think they need to rotate that player who's deeper more, and I think it makes it a bit harder for the opposition to predict what Collingwood are going to do.
They ground out that win, as you've both discussed, something Geelong couldn't do against Port Adelaide, who, in true Port emotion and just grit and fight, got a valuable win against the ladder-leading Geelong.
Yeah, a tough win, as you mentioned, and give them a huge amount of credit. Scott Lycett and the midfielders, they were tough, Lloydie, weren't they? The clearances and contested possessions, they smacked the Cats. Look at these stoppage goals. If you get one of these a game, you're going really well, but they got a couple. plus 16 in clearances, plus 36, which is an enormous number in contested. Look, they're a good side with a lot of young players going well at the moment, but Houston and the backline absolutely shut down Hawkins and Gary Rowan. Look, they only lost by 11 points to Cats since their second loss of the year, so I don't think cracks are showing at the moment.
It's now what Port do next week for me. Port can put in performances like this, Damo. They're a good side, Port. But, you know, West Coast, they were in West Coast space, they beat them, they do it to Geelong, and then they have a shocker against Hawthorn in Tassie, lose to Fremantle in
Too reliant on the emotional side.
Yeah, I think so,
Dave.
That's a good point. I reckon they get built up. Yeah. You know, Kenny Hinckley's an emotional person, and they have a letdown. So they play the Western Bulldogs this week. They should smash the Dogs to show what their credentials are.
Just before we move on to Paddy Ryder's situation at the Power, do you not see any cracks either in Geelong? They've lost a game by a kick to GWS and now another game to Port by 2 kicks.
The Ruckman. So that's the biggest crack, and he's had a good year. But
Reece Stanley.
Yeah, come finals time, a big monster Ruckman, Reece is a worry.
And Scott Lysette did a really good job on him on the weekend. It left Paddy Ryder in the sandful. Does he get back at all in 2019?
I think he's a strong chance to, but it's the balance though. It all depends on Charlie Dixon and how he's moving, because they would have looked at Dixon being the one, because he is so big, he can come, sub or fill in the ruck and play the one genuine ruckman. So it looked like a balance issue to me. Whether then where do you play Paddy, or Lysette, whoever you decide to go number one, if they're not in the centre bounce?
I think he's in trouble. With Dixon back, I don't see how they play him unless
he may have played his last game for Port.
Maybe. I think he's just a backup now for Lysette, and we've got 3 clubs. They're offering him 1 year, Port Adelaide, Richmond, GWS, and Geelong. And I think someone's going to fail. It's going to be the Giants or Geelong, and it wouldn't surprise me if their big men let them down, whether it's Mumford or Reece Stanley. Paddy Ryder, you put your arm around him and say, you're our number one for the next 2 years, you could get a brilliant ruckman, an All-Australian ruckman in the next couple of years.
The Lions did a number on the Saints in the third quarter of their game at Marvel Stadium on the weekend, kicked 9 goals to 1 in that particular period.
The Lions were super. And their best footy is fantastic. And we talk about what they could do in a final to a team. And that's the type of footy they could play. Charlie Cameron, when he left Adelaide, I thought, how good is he? Could he get teased? But what a super player he's been for them.
Yeah, and he benefits from the fact of bringing in Link McCarthy, who played a super game on the weekend. We know Dane Zorko can show some serious forward craft. Alan Christensen back in the side is a small forward. They've got some elite small forwards, but that third quarter we mentioned, they're plus 27 in contested possession. That's a huge number over the entire game, but they just got the Saints on the outside, and we've seen them play this style of footy at the Gabba, which they are hard to beat up there, but look, they were really disappointing a couple of weeks ago against Carlton, so they've had 2 weeks to think about this, but the response was fantastic from the Lions.
So are we back to thinking they are a good finals team for this year?
I think they play finals. They're running home. I think they've got 5 left at the Gabba. I think they win, even if they win 4 of those, that'll be enough and pinch another one away from home.
The loss left the St Kilda team at a 6-7 scoreline, and I feel that is about all that could have been asked of Alan Richardson to this point. It needs to be factored in that of the 6 wins, 2 have come against the Gold Coast, and the other 4 have been against teams below them or thereabouts on the ladder. None of them are in the 8. Simon Leflene's comments yesterday were pretty hard, weren't they, on what Alan Richardson needs to do, which is it's his 6th year. If he doesn't know whether he's good enough to be coach of this team going into next year now, how is the next 9 weeks going to benefit this situation?
Yeah, well, I know, Lloydie, you and I have a little bit of different point of views about or the way they come to the decision, but I think if you looked at the Saints at the start of the year, with all the players in, and they were 6-7, I think most people would give that a tick. But now you take out the players, and I'll go through them. Geary, Stephen, Robertson, Webster, McCartan, Loney, Carlisle, Hanbury. So 4 out of your 6 best defenders. 4-time best and fairest out. Your number 1 draft pick, who you're going to probably try and build your forward line out. And your 6 and 7, what's that, 1 game out of the 8 at the moment? I think you need to take that into consideration when making the decision.
Yeah, I think they should too, but just deep down I feel that the St Kilda are asking, can we get someone better than Alan Richardson? And that's why I think he's coached well, and he can leave possibly this year and say, well, I coached pretty well in my last season. Just your gut feel senses that they are ready to make a change.
If a senior official is making public commentary about we need to improve, and you've only got a 9-game runway now to do it, having already had 5.5 seasons, you're not going to be there.
Yeah, I think that is where it'll be factored in. I don't think they'll take this year, because if they renew him, you've got to almost renew him for a couple of years, don't you? Because then that'll take him out to 8 years.
Yeah.
So I think they'll be reviewing the whole entire 6 years.
Yep. Redemption is a word you could use for Tom McDonald's performance on the weekend. I like how he's carried himself as a person through this real battle that he and his club have had this year, but he was the dominant person on the ground.
Can only get better, can't he? Because he's had a horror year, Tom McDonald, and I don't know if it's been mental for Tom. It's been the struggling to cope with the number one challenge of being the number one forward down the field. The ball use hasn't been good. I think he'll hit back hard in the next 8 weeks, and I think he'll be a good player next year for Melbourne. People are asking, do they need someone to help him? No, he needs to be the man.
Does he?
I think he needs to be the man, the number one forward.
Just work through...
Yeah, because who do you get that's better? Like, people around the competition.
And force Wiedemann to come with him.
Yeah, that's right. That's how I see it.
And exactly right, Lordy. I think this group can play finals next year. I think their ball movement is the concern. And you mentioned, is Tom McDonald the man? He's the man. Wiedemann's the man. They've got the talent there, but they suffer from their ball movement at the moment. They have a truckload of inside 50s, but they just don't use the ball well enough at the moment.
Has injuries finally got a hold of the Dockers, who I feel were really positioning themselves nicely for a serious tilt at this year's title even? Jesse Hogan, the latest one to go down, he's added now to a list that includes some pretty key names in Alex Pearce, Matt Taberner, Rory Lobb and Aaron Sandlands, who doesn't play at all anymore. Yeah,
well, injuries certainly got them on the weekend. I know Melbourne were good and they finished the game full of running, but Hogan went off so early. Hill hurt himself. Wilson could barely move. Look, they were out on their feet in the last quarter and a half, Freo, and they had players cramping everywhere. They've got Cam McCarthy sitting there, and whether they go with some taller, mid-sized midfielders who can push forward, because Matera's putting together a nice year. I think he's got 24 goals in 11 games, and we know how well Sonny Walters is playing. You
mentioned that man Matera. He's got a bag of tricks that very few have. Jimmy, take us through.
Well, that's just pure talent. He's bounced it to himself like a basketball, hacked out of mid-air, and the next one we'll see where he's laying on his back and gets it to a teammate actually resulted in a goal. But just quick thinking, like I said, I think he's been absolutely fantastic for Freo, and allows Walters to go up into the midfield because he's hitting the scoreboard as a small forward.
Hey, Damo, whatever happens from here now, I think they are a much better football club for whatever happens, because Hogan's only going to get better a second year, Lobb's only going to get better. Obviously, learning to play with Matera and all these guys, Walters, Fife. Next year, I think they'll be much better again. So injuries might hurt them this year, but I think signs are good for
almost been 3 seasons of not seeing anything.
Yeah, exactly.
You can see a lot.
It's exciting,
now. Yeah, go back to Friday night. Callum Sinclair, the big Sydney Swans ruckman, who was good in this game against Hawthorn, but as you can see here, halfway through the last quarter, had this happen to him, and it clearly left him confused. He was concussed, he was dazed, he was having conversations that he didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, I've actually been in that situation before. You think you're making a lot of sense, and you think, I'm onto it. I'm good to play, but everyone around you, this is where during the week they inform you how some of the silly things you've been saying, but the Docs, put him straight on the bench, and look at Tom Papley.
He's asked the question, was I concussed? And Papley says that, and then Aliir finds himself involved in a conversation he's got no idea about.
I reckon this is the best bit. Aliir's reaction is like, what are you saying, mate? And even the Swans think, let's chuck some headphones on Aliir and get him out of there, because he's just not talking any sense here, Cal Sinclair.
Jimmy, you had a few concussions yourself, junior football and throughout your AFL career. When you see someone like that there, clearly not having any idea, and the faculties are not part of his repertoire right then, how relatable is it to you?
Oh, well, like I said, I can completely understand how Cal was feeling. I've been in that situation. I know once I was at the MCG and I had a concussion like Cal Sinclair, and I thought I was wearing everybody else's clothes. I had brand new runners, I'd found new footy boots, but it was all my stuff, and it wasn't until during the week where the player welfare and the doc said, you just weren't with it, you thought you were ready to play. But that's the beauty of the AFL system. We have great medicos who have the players' safety and welfare at heart at first.
Yep. Now, pre-concussion moment for Callum Sinclair, he had a moment he probably might like to take back, as would his teammate Dane Rampe. When this ball came in, you could hear the siren go on 3/4 time, and they both just allow it to bounce through.
Absolute brain fade, and it sort of gave Hawthorn a bit of momentum on 3/4 time, and you thought, could they be a chance for this? Sinclair, Rampe, no talk. Not sure they didn't know the rules or what, because he kicked the ball before the siren went. And fortunately for the Swans, they had a good last quarter, but that could have hurt them.
Yeah, that back 50 at the SCG is not a great place for Dane Ramsey. He's climbing goalposts, calling umpires' names, giving away 50s.
Letting balls go through.
Yeah, just not the end for you, Dane.
If Collingwood is playing ordinarily and sitting second, is West Coast in a similar boat, sitting fourth?
What they've got to do, I think it's a good point. They're in a wonderful position too, but I thought they played nice footy in the first quarter and allowed Essendon to kick goals, and it was 4 goals apiece. But once they tighten the screws and become that defensive team we know they can be, pretty good performance.
And Nick Nat to come back in as early as this week, looking as excited about anything in 2019 as that happening. Brodie, you've been really strong on the Bombers, and rightly so. You put it on them this show last week when you said the next 2 Thursday night games will tell you whether they are any good and whether the coach will be there next year. They failed badly in the first of those 2. They've got GWS this Thursday.
And one of their own midfielders, Dylan Shield, said 3 weeks ago that we have a game style that can beat teams around us and below us, but we haven't shown that we can beat anyone above us. And that should have been a 70 to 80 point loss on the weekend. 64 inside 50s to 40 pretty much sums up the gulf between the two teams.
Are you dubious too about where they're at?
Yeah, I need them, as Lloydie was saying, and Dylan Shield spoke about. I want to see this game style against the best. They played really good footy against sides around them, but the Eagles certainly showed them up. And the Eagles, that game probably should have been a 10-plus goal win for the Eagles.
All right, time now for the Access Big Ask. I'll be firing a few questions to both of you. And this one is to both of you. Would you pick Jaden Stevenson in an elimination final after 10 weeks of no footy?
Straight in for me.
Yep, straight in.
To Jimmy, will Ben Stratton be the Hawks captain next year?
You'd think so. You don't normally make a captain for just 1 year, do you?
Lloydie, Ryder, Lysette, Dixon, can they all play in the same port side?
No, they don't.
Ryder's out. Jimmy, what's the biggest rort? The wasted millions on Israel Folau's failed AFL career, or the hundreds of thousands this very rich man has snared from a GoFundMe page?
That second one, the GoFundMe page, that's embarrassing.
Jimmy again, who's closer to a flag, Essendon or Hawthorn?
I'm waiting to the end of trade period to make my decision.
Oh, come on, Jimmy, answer now.
No, that's it. Hawthorn could do something big.
Lloydie, who's closer to a flag, Port Adelaide or the Crows?
Adelaide this year, a bit more experience. Port is still young.
Lloydie, thank you. Jimmy, thank you. And thanks for watching Access All Areas, brought to you by Virgin Australia. We'll see you next Monday. Goodbye.